Welcome back to the program. Now we were discussing the 7 points. I'm coming towards point number 5, which is writing the script, putting the conditions for those Iran would be shaking hands with. So condition number condition number 5 would be unconditional release of all political and pro-democracy activists in Saudi Arabia and the influence of Saudi Arabia across the King Fahd Causeway, that's Bahrain. So obviously releasing all the political prisoners and pro-democracy activists of Al-Wifaq, like Sheikh Salman Al-Wifaq, Muhammad Habib Safaf, the people like Nabil Rajab, Sayyid Salik Maliki, all these people, Sadiq Maliki, so they should be released unconditionally. And in Saudi Arabia, Sheikh Bakir al-Nimr and his teenager nephew, Ali Muhammad, Ali Muhammad Nimr.
Sure.
So how can you frame ludicrous charges against a 17-year-old boy, and you said that all those it's a case of ideal classical case of the wolf and the lamb, and you have sentenced him to death, and you say crucifixion. So what crucifixion? Hadal harba. So are you Muslim? Where did you get that term from? Crucifixion, and where you're moving to. So unconditional release of all these political prisoners could be another big condition. Your take on that?
Well, look, insofar as that particular condition concerned, I think it's a very good point to put on the agenda, that really to have that handshake would require Saudis to take certain actions, as Mr. Kerry used to put when the P5+1 discussions were taking place, that Iran needs to take certain actions before we are able to sit and have a discussion. So, look, I'm usually, congenitally optimistic, as our good friend Agapoya would say, congenitally optimistic. So I think on that perspective, there will be a wind of change taking place in Saudi Arabia, either through implosion or external pressure, or what happens in Yemen. Because I think Yemen is really the crucible of what's happening to Saudi Arabia, because I think they're going to get a bloody nose. They are, to use your cricketing analogy, they're on a sticky wicket there, and it's an impasse. So if they have a defeat in Yemen, which it looks like very clearly, then I think they'll have to re-evaluate where they are going and what their future strategy would be, because Yemen will, we talk about Syria and, in geopolitical sense, what's been happening in Syria because of the region and the countries that it's connected with is very, very important. But because Yemen is one of the poorest countries on this planet, and the killing fields that Saudi and the other Khaliji nations are inflicting on Yemen will be their undoing, I believe, from there. So if that happens, then automatically there would have to be some kind of change in approach in Saudi Arabia itself, and then they might be able to accept the condition of releasing all these activists who are being held in prison, or not only Sheikh Nimr, but you remember the case of this blogger only a few months ago, was sent to 10 years or 12 years imprisonment.
And lashes.
Yeah, and lashes. And his sister...
1,000 lashes.
Yeah, her sister was she made a YouTube about this particular incident. So the regime itself is very frightened of any criticism, is really lives in a nightmare situation, that if they allow any kind of freedom. When we talk about sort of, when I was coming back from Iran just last week, I met 2 Dutch youngsters who had traveled to Iran. And I said, what are you doing here? They said that, we were just fascinated by Iran. So I said, how did you find it? They said, it's an incredible country. Women are free to drive metro. I said, go to Saudi Arabia, they can't even drive a car. So these are the things that people, and those individuals, those brothers, and those thinkers, and even journalists, the sort of paid journalists, because Saudi regime dominates a lot of media, as you know, Arabic media,
embedded journalists.
Yeah, especially Arabic media, where there's print media, broadcast media,
Even the Western media.
Yeah, Western media, in a big way. So the Saudi line is being pushed all the time, and these journalists, especially the Arab journalists who write for the Arabic papers, I'm not very good in Arabic, but my Arab friends give me feedback that they write most atrocious things against Iran, in support of the Saudi regime. But even through all that cloud of misinformation and disinformation that goes out from the Saudi controlled media, people in the streets of Rabat or Rawalpindi or any of the other Muslims, the ordinary people, still can see that Saudi regime is not good for the Muslim world. It has done nothing for the Muslim people to alleviate the ghurbat, the real poverty that we see in the Muslim world.
No, having said that, if I have to act as an honest broker, if two teams are coming, one from Riyadh, one from Tehran, I can vouch for the team coming from Tehran. Maybe Rabber, the supreme leader, using his vision, using his peacefulness, promotion of Muslim unity. Maybe he says, all right, team is formed, team can be formed, and can be led by Mamusta Amin Rasti, the Hanafi top cleric in Iran. But if that big gesture is extended by Tehran, by the Supreme Leader's office, then the Saudis will have to form the similar team of 7 people led by Sheikh Nimr.
Yes, that would be interesting, wouldn't it?
Here is the piece.
Yes.
So this is the 5th point. My 6th point is more intriguing. As students of history, yourself and me, in the last 35 years, the Saudis directly or indirectly creating their vassal states, creating their Pekinis, creating their own places, states of their influence where their ideology was pushed, was transported, transferred through mosques, palatial mosques. Some of them you don't find the namazis over there. Countries like Pakistan, Libya, the Gulf Cooperation Council, other five members of the GCC, Indonesia, Malaysia, the hotbeds of radicalization. And even here,
Sure.
in the UK.
I was about to say that.
Yeah, about 22, 23 mosques.
Sure.
Where so many radical, the killer zombies they have been trained, and they went to Syria and they went to Iraq and elsewhere to kill people there. So in the last 35 years, directly or indirectly, the Saudis have the blood in their hand for 20 million Muslims that were killed,
Sure.
and more than 7 million alone in Algeria. So what about that?
But look,
Then I'm coming towards Iraq, Pakistan, then Yemen and Syria. So 20 million people, the blood of 20 million people is in the hands of the Saudis in the last 35 years. So how they would respond to that? They'll have to share the accountability. Rather, they are the only one accountable. How would they be able to? So what sort of punishment should be? Or what qisas should be asked from the Saudis to pay for that?
well, I think the biggest punishment would be the removal. And this is not just wishful thinking. I'm sure you've come across the paper published by the CIA itself, where they're talking about that in the next 10 years, USA will be moving away from supporting the Saudi regime, because USA's focus is moving to the China Sea, China and Japan and the Far East. Therefore, the support that the Saudis were receiving from the US may diminish to a significant degree, and when that diminishes, the possibility of Saudi not being able to stand on its own will become more magnified, it will be more significant. So my wish list is not just a wish list, but I think it's the future that is quite ugly for the Saudi rulers if they don't realize that they are on a very difficult situation at this moment for their survival. How long they will survive, I don't have a crystal ball to say that it could be the next 5 years or 10 years. But certainly, I don't think, just like the rabbi said that Israel wouldn't be on the world map in the next 25 years.
Zionism.
Israel is Zionism.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's not a Jewish state.
Not the people of Israel.
Of course not. I mean, that goes without a shadow of the doubt, because there are 30,000 Jews living in Iran, and they have their own MP.
Yeah.
So Iran is not there to eliminate Jews, but certainly the Zionist regime, as you well know, you don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist. You could be a Muslim or a Christian or a Hindu, and you can still be a Zionist. So it's not a religious ideology. It's a political ideology which is foreign, which obviously the Zionists have used Judaism as a cover to perpetrate the crimes that they have been committing in that region since the creation of the State of Israel. However, both of these regimes, and it has become abundantly clear to anyone who is unbiased, anyone who has an iota of thinking in them, to see that how closely they have been working together, Israel and Saudis, especially with the Syrian crisis and P5+1 opposition. They have become so much closer. The security services of the Saudis and the Israelis have been working together. In fact, it has, what happened in Lebanon in 2006, what happened in Hamas in Gaza last year and 2 years prior to it, Saudis were completely silent as to what Israel was doing to both of those places. So I think the Muslim Ummah, who have been hoodwinked for the last almost 90 years, since 1932, that because Makkah and Medina happen to be geographically in that region, in that part of the world where the whole Muslim world is obligated to go. I was at Hajj. My first Hajj was in 2000, and I went with my second one in 2000. Went with my family,
and in 2000 we had the casualties as well.
Yes, we had some. And I was coming back, and there was a bit of a kerfuffle I had at the airport. So one of the Saudi guys was being rude to me. I said, look, I wish God had made Hajj possible in Geneva. We would have all gone to it, because the climate is beautiful, the scenery is nice.
And you would have been grazing your cattle.
Exactly, But because it's in Makkah and Medina, we have to come and face your ugly nonsense. However, leaving that aside, because it's an obligation, people go to it, and people get sort of really, as I said, hoodwinked by it. That's one thing. Secondly, if you look at it, over the last 70, 80 years, how many foreigners have been working there? Currently, there are about 9 to 10 million expats who work in Saudi Arabia, out of which I suspect 80 to 90% are from the Muslim world, whether they're from Malaysia or whatever, Bangladesh, and so on. Indonesia. So over the last, I don't know, let's say 70 years, at least 100 to 150 million Muslims have worked there. So they have, a majority of them, or significant number of them, have become unpaid advocates of Wahhabism whenever they go back to their countries. These are not sort of guys who are being paid, but because they've been inspired by living there for 5, 10, 15 years. It's like someone who comes to UK as an undergraduate, studies at Oxford or Cambridge, goes back to their country, and they still have allegiance with UK. They're not paid by the British government, but they have emotional ties. So similarly, these workers have emotional ties with Wahhabism, so they become advocates, unpaid advocates. That's one thing which a lot of us have not analysed, that how much impact that has had in those countries.
Now with that, I move on to my seventh and the last point. That before rapprochement takes place and the Saudis shake hands with Iranians, the seventh condition which I am putting as honest broker is that Saudis will have to ensure that they will not interfere in the domestic affairs of any other country, Muslim or non-Muslim. Okay? They are interfering in the UK as well.
Sure.
And that interference, may that be building mosques or building madrasas or feeding people like Fazlur Rahman and Samiul Haq in Pakistan.
Sure.
And creating a small schism, some splinter groups, and they are there aggressively, violently. They push their political agenda. They push their political credo in one big province and then in Balochistan as well. So that is another condition which Saudis, they have to sign that document. Okay, we will not interfere in any other country's domestic affairs. And what is your opinion on this point?
This particular point, I think, is the pivot. It's really the most crucial.
Should I reverse my order then?
Well, perhaps you might have to put it, the batting order might have to change,
Yeah.
Instead of putting the seventh one as put that point as an opening batsman, if you like, for your sort of honest broker thought on it. Look, interference can be at many levels. As you quite rightly said, there are some people who are direct in the pay of Saudi, the mosques, the madrasas. But through this program, one thing that I want to highlight, which I have noticed through some of my contacts here in London in the last week or so, as you know, universities have started in UK. Freshers Week takes place. That whole 1 week is a way of new students to get immersed in the culture of the university. And as you well know, and those of the viewers who have been to university, Freshers Week is a time of partying, really. There are different societies, different cultural associations that the new students are, cajoled into join. And they've been Islamic societies up and down the country. Some of these Islamic societies have some, same kind of weird dresses, high pajamas, very long beard students who maybe second or third year students cajoling and inciting the first year students to come and join. And that is really quite a danger, I think, that is taking place in universities in UK at this moment, where these Islamic societies, whether they're funded by Saudi regime or not, or by some other third parties, they are actually creating a situation for new students to join those societies. And what would happen in the next 3-4 years, God only knows. So I think it's a particular interference that is taking place, as I said, not directly but indirectly through recruitment of younger students to the ideology of Wahhabism and Takfirism. Because the discussions that have been reported to me is that these Islamic society, if you like, intermediaries, shall I call them, who try to cajole new students into their societies, they don't talk against Shias, but they say, like some of the comments from people, that Iran is this bad, Iran has been interfering. So really, they're hiding their agenda of saying that the Shias are kafir, so to speak, by using the cover of Iran to propagate the ideology. So it's an interesting tactic which is taking place at universities up and down the country to portray as Iran as something out of the realm of Islam and actually being against the Muslim world. But in reality, Brother Ijaz, if Iran for the last 35 years had abandoned the cause of Palestine, then Iran would have faced no problem at all. Iran would have been the best boy on the block. Business would have been as usual as it was during the period of Raza Shah Pahlavi, and Iran would have not faced any sanctions. So the reality is that Iran has lost out because it has supported
to the Mustadafin.
Exactly. That has been the
oppressed people.
That has been the
Muslim people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That has been the bedrock of why Iran has faced all these sanctions, not because of change of Saddam in Iraq or what's happening with Assad in Syria. Those are new issues. But from the beginning, the key step that Imam Khomeini took as soon as he came into power, two things he did. One, cut off diplomatic relationships with South Africa, and secondly, to throw out the Israeli embassy from Tehran and give it to the Palestinians. And it became the headquarters. Yasser Arafat used to visit there. So if Imam Khomeini and the leadership at that time had said, what has Palestine got to do with us? Let them, do whatever they want. But because Iran took that particular step, that's why it has suffered for the last 35 years. There is no other issue that has created such a big problem for Iran, but because Iran's philosophy and the philosophy of the revolution and the philosophy of Imam Khomeini has been to support the oppressed people wherever they are, whatever ideology they have, whatever religion they follow. Because this is the message of Imam Hussein al-Islam, this is the message of Imam Ali, that to support the people who are oppressed, irrespective of what their religion or belief may be.
But I mean, that's a very interesting point, that the youth knocking at the threshold, at the door of the universities. I mean, the British youth, British students properly coming from the classical stream, A-level stream, GCSE stream, baccalaureate stream, they are much enlightened. They understand their visible and invisible enemies. So the situation was different 2, 3, 4 years ago. But this government has really very intelligently tackled that problem. And they have plugged in the gaps. They were there in the madrasas, in the universities, in the colleges, where all these people, the grotesque appearance, I mean, these people, they could influence the youth. But now youth is much more grown up. They have the guidelines at Foreign and Commonwealth Office, they have the guidelines at the Home Office, the guidelines in the local government. And all the literature, now they have read so much about ISIS, about ISIL, that whosoever preaches in the university pulpits, in the university fresher weeks, whosoever preaches that you have to, do this and do that, and you forget about Iran, and you have to lambast Iran and other creeds, the people here will take that with the pinch of salt. People are very skeptical here. This is the area, and I have full trust in this nation, the British nation. They're a great, vibrant nation. They're resilient people. I mean, they fought 2 major world wars in the 20th century. And they emerged from those 2 wars. Even after exhausting all their resources, they emerged and they are still surviving. And all those who waged wars on them in the First World War, where Turkey is today, they are the part of history. So neither British, neither Western nor Eastern. So I have full trust and full confidence in this nation, that this nation is not going to be astray.
No, I agree with you entirely on that, but I just wanted to use this particular opportunity so that your viewers could at least talk to their youngsters, their kids who are at university, to be cautious of sort of discussions with these elements, because these days no one will openly talk about ISIS support and so on, because otherwise they'll get in trouble with the authorities. But they'll use other tactics, as I said, by lambasting Iran. That's fine, because it's a political issue. You can lambast Iran if you like, but there's an agenda behind lambasting.
As we are approaching towards the last few minutes of our program, I'm coming towards the conclusion that We being Muslims, we don't want Saudi Arabia to be weak. We want a strong, powerful Saudi Arabia as a very responsible, powerful member of the Muslim polity of 57 years. And we love 29.75 million people of Saudi Arabia. We love them. All we are against is the tyrannical regime. Those who are wasting their resources. I mean, how can you justify one person? One person buys a palace in this country for £500 million, and he comes only occasionally and lives there. Other person has got built a huge palace in Sunningdale, and only the outer boundary wall is £3 million worth. Other person has made another palace there which is worth another £500 million in Langcross near Windlesham in Surrey. So how can you justify that one person comes here and he buys a number plate for his car for £7 million, number one, on Rolls Royce. The other person comes who parks a car for 1 week in the middle of the road, he gets £6,000 worth of ticket, and he says, all right, I can pay that. How can you go to Harrods, you go to Chelsea, you go to High Street, Kensington, and see how these people, they are burning their money. They come to Legoland, they come to different other parks like Thor Park, and how they waste their money over there. I mean, that money belongs to the Muslim Ummah, the 57 nations. If they got oil in their country, that oil is by virtue of the blessings of Allah, who bestowed upon those blessings on Muhammad and Ali Muhammad, on Muslimin, on Mu'mineen. But that wealth of oil and gas is being exploited by Saudi Arabia alone. So how can you justify that in the 21st century? And then the state of democracy, the state of rule of law, justice and fair play, unemployment, all these things you will have to address there. You will have to think about 29.75 million people in Saudi Arabia, not only for 200,000 people in Saudi Arabia. So you're wasting human resources. You're accountable, and you're answerable to 57 member states of OIC, all the Muslim countries. People dying in Rohingya, people dying in Lebanon, people dying in Syria, dying in Yemen, only for your ideology. They are resisting your ideology. Why don't you redirect your resources, economic resources, political resources, diplomatic resources towards these poor Muslims? And if you start directing your resources towards poverty alleviation amongst the Muslims, towards dealing with the health issues, dealing with the water and sanitation, dealing with disease, if you tackle that, if you redirect your resources towards that, what a shame that people like Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, Zuckerberg, and other non-Muslims, the Christians and Jews, philanthropists, they are sending millions of pounds. Look at Oxfam. I mean, they are sending. They are not Saudis, they are not Muslims. So if you want to claim, heavy is the head that wears a crown. If you want to behave, if you want to claim that special place, status of being our elder brother, of Khadman Harman Sharifan, then for God's sake, it's not only the privilege. There are certain responsibilities and obligations attached to that. If you fulfill those obligations, we are happy to live with that. But if you don't, please, this is double standards, and we are against double standards. We are against hypocrisy, and we are against transgression of any law, may that be Islamic law or the mundane law which United Nations and other nations they follow. With that, we conclude our program. I'm really thankful, Shabir Bhai, you came all the way.
It's always a pleasure.
And you shared your erudite views with us. And we are grateful to Brother Azam and Brother Azhar who made their telephone calls. And if they want to learn more about that, I'm happy to invite them in our program. and maybe next Monday or the following Monday. And I'm happy to even cover the cost of traveling for Brother Azam if he's happy to come to Watford, and he's here taking the seat of Brother Shabir, and he discusses that with me. With that, I say Khuda Hafiz and goodbye.